Hello, hello. Can you hear me all right? Let me see. Let me count. We have like more than 10 people. That's a win for 4:30 p.m. Thank you all for being here, and don't be shy. Feel free to come on in here in the front if you would like. We appreciate you being here to listen to us, and if you're not sure why you're here, let me tell you this is going to be the best session of the day for you. Let me start by telling you who I am. I'm Aditya Krujekar. I'm founder of Identity.ai. I've been in the fintech world for close to 15 years, spent my last couple of years in the digital identity world, especially looking at decentralized identity. And now I'm building a company called Identity.ai, which is going to help with digitally signing content very easily so we can decide what to trust on what we see on the internet. So that's me, having built and sold 2 companies in the last 13 or so years. I'm now excited to do my third one. What I'm more excited to do here is to share the next 20 minutes with you, and I'm very happy to have Tori Samples and Sohail Sahaji here with me. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves so I don't do a bad job at it, right? So maybe Tori, if you go first, and then Sohail, and then we'll get into some Q&A. And if you stick around until the end, I get to ask you a question. There'll be a pop quiz, and then you win a prize. How's that? Yeah? So, all right, go ahead.
I'm glad I'm not on the hook for that. I don't need another pub quiz in my life today. I'm Tori Samples, and I am in product of the Stellar Development Foundation. I lead our bulk payments and humanitarian use cases, which is kind of a funny pairing, but actually makes sense when you think about the way that it came about. I lead a program called Stellar Aid Assist, which enables organizations like the UNHCR to send cash to refugees across the world. If you look at the product underneath that, it's bulk payments, sending from an organization to many people at once. My background before that was in the digital wallet space. I built a digital wallet for refugees and migrants in Africa on the Stellar blockchain and sold that to a US company last year before coming over to SDF. So excited about this topic, frankly. I wish that this content was just built into every panel that you see throughout the day, but I think we'll get there in time.
Thank you, Tori. Sohail?
So my name is Sohail Sahaji. I'm associate professor of energy and petroleum engineering. So I'm an engineer by heart. And my interest in the blockchain space is at the cross-section of blockchain, energy, and sustainability. And I think there is a really sweet spot there to explore. So my background is very technical. However, and blockchain by itself what was my hobby, I guess, as a side, but at some point I wrote a white paper on how carbon credit markets could work on blockchain. Of course, I was not the first person with the idea, but what I guess my white paper did was put a bigger picture, how the whole ecosystem would work rather than just carbon credit, how the entire stakeholders will get involved on blockchain, and that took a lot of attention from the people, and I get calls, random calls from VCs sometimes. Since then, we started some research towards this area of sustainability, energy, and blockchain. We currently have 3 PhD students working on this area in my team, and I came to this particular venue because this is not necessarily my crowd. I'm really talking technical conferences, but here is I'm exploring how this thing can be expanded to other areas, and there's definitely some overlap with the other panel members here.
Thank you, Sohail. And you might be wondering, why are these 3 very dissimilar people on stage here in this session? But I think that is the beauty in my mind of the blockchain. Let me do a quick show of hands. How many of you would not call yourself crypto natives? 1, 2. A few of you are not crypto natives. But the reason that you are here, obviously, you know what the blockchain is. So obviously, you are excited by what blockchain makes possible, or at least intrigued, if not excited, right? And I think, if we go back in time when people didn't even know the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain, say 10 years ago, we didn't know what blockchain should do for us. All we knew was there was this thing called Bitcoin. Today, we have come a long way. Right? And the work that Tori and Sohail do in their own ways is illustrative of that. The power of blockchain, from my perspective, is really about having. I don't like the word trustless, because trustless makes it sound like very impersonal. I think the power of the blockchain is in the perpetuity of the information that is stored there, in the ability to trust the information because it is trustless, and the power of digital identity to not be now be in the hands of a select few, but be in the hands of the people whose identity it is, right? And I think blockchain has allowed us to understand the true ethos of Web3 and decentralization with pragmatic use cases, which is what excites me about it. But let me ask Tori, to kind of tell us about how you see the value, and especially with the work that you do from a finance perspective. Payments is one of those very early use cases of the blockchain that everybody thought they knew exactly what it was. But after having done this for so many years in a variety of ways, can you help us with understanding the challenges, how you look at those challenges? What are some of the not so obvious things that you're doing right in the work that you do? Maybe just help us with how the work you do is difficult yet impactful.
Absolutely. Well, the Stellar Development Foundation, first of all, is a nonprofit entity that supports the growth of the Stellar ecosystem. Hopefully you all know Stellar is a layer 1 blockchain, and we did start with payments in 2014, so we're one of the older blockchains. Since then, we've come a long way. So we originally focused on cross-border payments and making those as fast and cheap as an email, which everyone says today, but was pretty novel back in 2014. But since then, I mean, we're in a number of spaces now. So we just actually we're releasing a smart contracts platform for all your standard DeFi stuff. I believe that we have the largest representation of real-world assets on Stellar compared to any other layer 1. And we do a lot in the regulatory and policy space as well. So we like to say that we are the blockchain for the real world. We enable builders around the world to solve the problems of their context in their situation. And we're very passionate about that because we know that we can't solve those problems. If our team is sitting in a particular place in a particular context, we understand our own payments landscape. But that doesn't mean that we can solve problems across the world. And so our goal is to build products and tools that help people do that in their own space. And so like for me, I was one of those ecosystem builders before coming to the Development Foundation. And I used Stellar, the blockchain itself, and the tools that the SDF put out to build a digital wallet for people in East Africa that then grew across the continent. And we did it for both non-smartphones and smartphones. So it's just one example of that relationship between the SDF and the builders that really unlock the keys to impact across the world. But in the payment space overall, I'd say that we have not solved all of the challenges. There are still friction points that need to be solved by people building in their own context. So that's what we look to enable. One of the ways that we're doing that today is through the platform that I mentioned, which is the Stellar Disbursement Platform that allows organizations to seamlessly send money to people who are not crypto native. We're talking about refugees, we're talking about gig workers, we're talking about freelancers living in places where they can't get access to bank accounts, they don't have a USD savings mechanism, but they want to be paid for the work they're doing, or they want to be able to receive funds from their government or an NGO. And through this tool, they're able to easily onboard without having to understand blockchain or crypto and receive money in that way in a stable form of value that can be off-ramped literally anywhere in the world. That's another one I should have mentioned. I think we have the highest number of cash out points for crypto to fiat of any other layer 1.
Look, I mean, I think this is the beauty of having a technology that truly transcends boundaries. It transcends technology boundaries, transcends political boundaries, transcends currency boundaries. Let me move to Sohail here, and obviously I have to learn something from him because he's a professor. If I didn't, then I would, shame on me. I learned this new term called the measurement economy. What is that? What does that mean? Can you help us?
Sure. So that's a term that's used in the energy industry, and the idea is that if you want to know, for example, let's say that you go to a store and want to buy a bottle of water, and you care what's the source of water. Is it sourced from somewhere safe? Is it following certain rules to get that? And that is nowadays possible. Nowadays, in the bottles, they say that a lot of information, but that's not the case for the energy. You just plug in your device to the electricity, and you get the energy in terms of electricity. So there is a move in the energy sector to move towards providing these type of information for the energy that you consume. And that requires, however, a lot of measurements that we're not traditionally not doing in the field, including, for example, talking about oil and gas, which is a traditional energy sector. We are not necessarily measuring our methane emissions everywhere when we are producing gas, or other emissions associated with the production. And there are certain companies moving towards that, meaning that they're spending a lot of capital in terms of putting measurement system in the field. with the hope that this develops economy, meaning that they can sell their fuels with a premium price. Because there are companies interested in investing in the low carbon fuels, although obviously we would like to get into renewables, but that is not here there and yet. So that would be a transition point that you can choose the source of your energy, and you might decide to pay a little bit more if you have lower carbon footprint energy. And that's the term carbon, the economy that is being used.
Yeah. So, I want to kind of look ahead, right? So I think, people, hopefully you got a flavor of what they do today. I want to talk about what you see on the horizon. I want to talk about, I want to hear you talk about what would be the opportunities that you see, some of the milestones as an industry that you feel we need to achieve. So can you, maybe starting with Sohail, how would you characterize some of the important milestones that you would like to see in the near future?
For me, the biggest one is a standardization. That's both within the industry and from the real world to the industry, that connection. So within the industry, obviously, we need to be able to perform cross-platform type transactions so that we are not bound by one blockchain. But outside also, when I'm looking at the problems that we have to solve with real world, the first thing is that how do we get the data? How do we clean the data? How do we put the data on blockchain, right? There is no standard out there. And people are trying. Nowadays, there's a lot of physical assets that are being transferred to digital. The problem is that it depends on the company, on the person that does it, rather than following certain standards. The same applies in the energy sector. And being from academia, I think that's an area that we can improve a little bit on, because we don't have a short time horizon of getting to profit. We are rather developing infrastructure for hopefully the future.
And how would you characterize some of the, because you talked about some of the challenges, right? But what would you like to see? Are there things that jump out that, hey, this is where, we need to have kind of that as a goal for us as an industry? How would you characterize kind of the next few milestones in the work that you do?
Everyone's lives would be easier if there were clear and consistent regulation. We know that. We're working towards it. We'll get there. Yeah. But outside of that, it's all about making these tools accessible to people where they are, and in a context that makes sense for them. And so we try to do that through building up the ecosystem of wallets and what we call anchors, basically cash in and cash out points across the world, and make that as diverse as possible. So you mentioned interoperability as well. That's something that we talk about a lot with other chains and other legacy financial institutions, so that ultimately this is a patchwork where people can move seamlessly through the system, and there is equitable access truly to the global financial system.
I want to touch on a topic that that might be a little bit uncomfortable for us to talk about, but I want to, right? Because, I straddle between the Web 2 and Web 3 worlds, right? When I talk to kind of classic Web 2 investors, they still feel like, oh, there's some stigma associated with the crypto folks. And, obviously, I don't believe that is true. I think that anxiety is misplaced. But I just want to open that up to the two of you. And Tori, you've spent time also in both the worlds. How do you look at the state of where we are in as an industry, and especially your role in it? And how would you explain to somebody who's not a crypto native that, hey, look, we are doing some cool stuff, read some cool stuff too? How would you characterize that?
Well, the proof is in the results, right? I mean, nothing speaks louder than that. But I think I might have joked on our prep call. I'm very glad personally that I'm not fundraising today. I'm glad that I did that a few years ago and got that out of the way. But I think that the situation that I found myself in is still largely true, where you have Web3 investors that are very comfortable with the technology, but don't understand how it can bridge that gap to the real world and meet people where they are and be used outside of just the very crypto native use cases. Then on the other side, you get impact investors that love the markets, but are terrified of the technology. And that's the stigma that you have to overcome. And so I think it's really helpful to have these proof points where you can say, yes, this is being used in difficult areas, in literal conflict zones, in places where there's hyperinflation. And that's not a theory. I can point to real people and real results on how this money is getting to people in need and being used across the world.
And I think that's a very profound point here, right? I mean, this technology is solving problems that conventional systems have not been able to solve, right? To get people who are impacted by wars and climate change and immigration, refugee population, having, giving them access to financial services. That is something that the traditional system did not solve for decades. You are solving it, so the proof point
It's a
is there.
missed opportunity, too. I mean, it's their loss that they haven't moved into that space. I think people always come in with a stigma that, poor people can't be profitable and therefore they're not worth serving. There are a number of flawed assumptions underneath that argument. But ultimately, they're missing out on what is a huge opportunity.
Is there a similar example in your world, in the climate change world, in the carbon world, where you can kind of showcase, hey, here's a proof point of what we do?
Absolutely. But however, my world is a little bit different. When I deal with the students, I deal with engineering students. So it turns out that they actually love learning about how technology works rather than the general public. So for them, I sit down and just open up the whole Pandora door of the blockchain and explain to them how it works, and then these are the applications. Hopefully, these are the future engineers that would go to work in this area. However, dealing with companies and other stakeholders, sometimes, yes, that's a friction. And in academia, people use DLT instead of blockchain. That's their solution, Right. But to me, everything goes back to education. Try to explain. Try to separate cryptocurrency from blockchain, and then explain. For our application, we are looking to blockchain, not necessarily cryptocurrency. And that seems to be the wave that I found it ease out people when you separate these two from each other.
Right. And look, I mean, I think the examples are out there for us to see. There are big problems that you are both addressing, right? You're solving complex problems that traditional systems have not been able to solve. I find myself in a similar world with identity.ai, right? We are trying to tackle the problem of misinformation and disinformation, okay? This is not an AI-specific problem, although my company is called identity.ai, but AI amplifies the problem, makes it more complex, because generative AI is dumping content on the internet that people don't know whether they can trust or not. And so using DLT, using cryptographic signature methods, using kind of the bridge between Web 2 and Web 3 to solve a complex internet-wide problem that is truly global is something that we are not scared of taking on. So I'm happy that you all stuck around. I think we might have time for one question maybe from the audience, yeah? If anybody has a question to ask, please raise your hand or just shout out. Any closing thoughts, since you don't have a question?
To tie the two together, climate change. One, we have to make sure that the underlying tools, like the blockchains themselves, don't contribute more to the problem. Stellar is very, very efficient. We did some research with PwC last year. I think the overall ecosystem has the footprint of 33 US homes, so very small. We're very proud of that. That's something that we look to advance. But then also, climate change is going to be the largest factor forcing displacement around the world over the next 50 years. And so we're looking to creative alternative solutions and research coming out of leading academic institutions like yours to help us bridge that gap.
Perfect. I just want to emphasize on something slightly different, and that's education. I think in this field, education works long term, not short term, but especially I'm coming from an academic background, and that's what I think we should do more of, trying to not talk about investment rather than education. I think that's at least the way I am approaching it.
And I think on that note, the importance of education, let's end it there. Thank you very much, and thank you for being in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditya, Tori, and Sohail. Much appreciate your time and energy. Blockchain, creative alternatives, and education.